Welcome everyone to the series review. I'm your host Scottish Warrior 92, and in this new series I pick a TV series and I'm going to review each episode of a select series of that, starting with the beginning and then eventually getting towards the end. And the series that I have chosen to be the debut episode is Smallville. I'm going to be reviewing each series of Smallville episode by episode and tell you whether or not they're any good, and then at the end of each season I will give an overall series review of that. So advanced warning, these will contain minor spoilers. I will try to keep as many spoilers to a minimum as possible. So yeah, I can't really say, I will have to spoil a few things, but I'll try and avoid them as much as I possibly can. Now of course we have to talk about what Smallville is. For those that aren't aware of Smallville is, Smallville is basically the story of Clark Kent growing up into becoming Superman. That's basically the story of it. There's a lot to it, but it focuses more on the character of Clark Kent rather than on the character of Superman, which is the one that most of us fixate on. We always think of the Man of Steel as Superman. However, Clark Kent is a character that has been explored in the past, but hasn't been explored in this depth. Now, Smallville has mixed reviews. People either love it, hate it, or they're kind of in the middle. I know some people that actually hate the series. I know some people that actually love the series. And I'm going to be judging each series as an individual one, starting with, of course, Series 1, and of course we'll be moving on to episodes. So I think there are about 22 episodes in Season 1, so you're getting 22 episodes of this for Season 1 alone. So let's divulge right into it and get straight to the pilot. Now, I just watched it last night, and I already have a page, nearly 2 pages worth of notes here about all the stuff that they got into this. Now, the pilot of a TV series is always one of the most important things there is, actually, in my opinion. The pilot and the finale are the 2 most important episodes, in my honest opinion. If you don't do the pilot right, you don't get people interested. If you don't do the finale right, you get the people who were interested going, see ya, time to go get another series. So like a dysfunctional relationship where you have to do everything either perfect or not perfect, and if you do things not perfect, they fuck off. That's about it, but Smallville has a devoted fan base. Now, Smallville's pilot got a lot in one episode. They established established almost every character they need to establish who would appear in later episodes. They didn't establish all of them perfectly, but they did get the majority of the cast done right. The first characters we are introduced to is, well, if you don't count the spaceship, the Luthors. We get introduced to Lionel Luthor and little kitty Lex Luthor at the start, which is always very nice. Always a good move to get the villain introduced into the series as early as possible, so that people can get a rough look at them. Now, Lex Luthor we all know about. Lionel Luthor I didn't know that much about before watching Smallville. I think he's a character that's made up for Smallville, but he might have existed in the comics. I'm not a big comic book buff, but we're introduced to Lionel, who will become quite a prominent villain in the series later on. But that's spoilers ahead. We also get introduced to other characters. We also get introduced to the Kents, which is nice. Clark's parents, Martha and Jonathan. We get to see that they are actually very kind people from the very start. You can tell that they're very good people, honest and all that. So that's a good thing to get across in the first episode. We also get introduced. Now, those are the main ones we get introduced to very early on in there. We get introduced to the ones that are the main. There are some sub-characters that are introduced, but a lot of them don't really add up to much in the first episode, or not too much in the season until very later on. And then, of course, they find Clark, which is always the nice little thing to do. They did do it justice in the way that he crashed the Earth and they stumbled across him, blah, 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 shit like that. Of course, Smallville becoming known as the meteorite capital of America after the meteor storm, which kills quite a lot of people. And we're also slightly hinted at that kryptonite was in there, but some kind of green rock was in there. You have to be paying attention to certain impact zones, but you can see that there was kryptonite there, which, if you were unfamiliar with Superman, you wouldn't know that much about but if you watch it, of course, if you are fair, which everyone knows a fucking Superman, you can guess that's fucking kryptonite. And that is also something that a couple of people have pointed to me in the past is a major problem with this thing, but I'll get to that when I get to that, because it isn't really touched on in episode 1, the pilot. And then of course we skip forward a couple of years and we're introduced to Clark as he's grown up, and he is your typical fucking 18. I don't know what age he's maybe. I think he's maybe about 17, 18. I'm taking a guess. He is a freshman. I don't know how that works in America. I think that's about 16 years old. I'm 17, maybe 18. I'm not 100% certain. It works differently over here. But we can see that he's still your typical teenager. He doesn't like the fact that he can't do what he wants because his parents are scared. Martha and Jonathan are worried about that. And of course, we also get to see him use one of his superpowers, his super fucking speed, in which he gets to school, basically. We also get introduced the character of Chloe and Pete. I hope I got his name right because I always forget his name. Who we also get a good bit of their character put on there. But we kind of establish what kind of characters they are from the very start. Chloe being the conspiracy nut, for a lesser term. Pete being sort of like the typical teenager, average boy, doesn't want to get picked on and doesn't want to really cause any trouble. Also, there's quite a bit of hinting at romance in the first episode. I didn't notice this until I watched it again, but there's a lot of bit of hint between Pete having a crush on Chloe, about Chloe possibly having a crush on Clark. It's kind of very loosely hinted that you have to be paying attention or you would miss it. Let's see, what else? We get a lot of the characters established. We get a lot of them characters. We also get the fact that Clark has a crush on Lana Lang, who's introduced as a kid at the start of the film, at the pilot. But then we get to see her a little older. Her parents were killed. And by the way, I have a quick thing to say about her parents. Her parents are fucking retards. I'm sorry, I have to say this. That bugged the fuck out of me. Spoiler alert. It happens within the first 5 minutes of the episode, but fuck it. Lana's parents are killed in the meteor storm because guess what happens? They get out of their car to pick up their daughter. They look up, they see a meteorite coming towards them, and what do? They look up and go, "What's that?" What? Retards! I wasn't sad to see them go. One less stupid person in the universe. I'm sorry, I'm sick bastard, I know. What else? Yeah, we get a lot of characterization in the episode. We get a lot of like what kind of character Jonathan and Martha are. We get that because they're very caring. They're worried about Clark. They want to keep him safe because of his powers and all that. They divulge it. They finally tell him his secret that yeah, you're a fucking alien. There's no possible way about it. They get that quite across. They introduce him as an alien, that kind of thing. He doesn't take it too well. Of course, he fucking fucks off. And then of course we also get hinted at of the Klana, as it's dubbed. Clark and Lana possible romance. It's very much hinted at. Like Clark has a crush on her. That's obvious. She might have a crush on him. It's kind of thrown up in the air and left to people. What else do we have? We also get Lex as well. He's brought into it, and they took a wee twist on this. They actually made Clark the way that they actually established Clark and Lex's relationship fairly quickly because Clark saved his life. That's it. He saves his life, and Lex thinks he owes him. In fact, he does owe him, kind of. And he wants to be friends with him and things like that. So there's a good build to a bit of characterization between there, like what kind of character Lex is, and it will evolve over time. So that's a good point of that. We're also told that, of course, Clark can't go anywhere fucking near the meteor rock because Lana's necklace is made from the meteor rock. So that's, of course, kryptonite. We guessed that. We're also hinted at, of course, the powers that kryptonite can give to you. And this is a problem that I've heard a lot of people complain about. A couple of my friends do complain about it. This is why they stopped watching Smallville. Is the fact that kryptonite gives people powers. And when, in actual fact, I think if I'm going correctly, it actually doesn't. I could be wrong. If you happen to know, I'm not a big comic book savvy guy, but kryptonite is Superman's weakness, so we know that. But in the Smallville universe, exposure to a large amount of kryptonite can give people superpowers and make them go a little cuckoo. As apparent with the first villain of the episode, which is a boy who we actually see at the start of the episode with Lex bumping into him as a kid, and he's basically strung up like a fucking scarecrow with a giant S on his chest. And subsequently, that happens to Clark 18 years later, or 10, 12 years later, give or take. Time frame is a bit tricky because it just is today, so it's kind of tricky to pinpoint. But yeah, the S, of course, Superman. We all know that kind of thing. It's kind of hinting at that, foreshadowing, blah blah, stuff like that. But yeah, the villain of that was just like basically he wanted revenge, and of course it's slightly hinted that the meteor rock may have done to that. It's never actually explicitly called kryptonite. Until a couple of, I think it's like about halfway through season 1, I'm not certain. But it's just called the meteor rock at the moment. And of course, Chloe suspects that, so it leads to more to her character of being a conspiracy nut, which is always nice. Of course, we also get the Jonathan's character. Also, we get told a lot about him. He also that he hates the Luthors. It's never explicitly said why he hates the Luthors. He does give a reason for it, but you can tell that he's hiding stuff. That's always a good sign when he does that. It gets you interested. Well, there's a lot of notes here that don't really matter. Just jabbling down. There we go. Of course, throughout the episode, it's also very much hinted at that Clark does mention destiny, which is going to be quite a prominent thing in Smallville, when people mention that they have a great destiny among them, which is always very well done in this thing. Always well done. It's a big problem in most series. If they don't do it right, it can fail miserably, but I think Smallville done it very well in the episode 1. Don't think there's much else I can say about the episode. As I said, I'd have to go into major spoiler territory, and I'd try and keep my reviews as spoiler-free as possible. So I'll just wrap this review up and give my positives and negatives of the episode, basically. Overall, it's a good pilot. It's actually a really good pilot. It doesn't fall into a lot of traps, which a lot of the other pilots fall in, which is not explaining too much. And they do, I think it's about a 45-minute episode, if memory serves me. They explain enough. Most pilots fail miserably in any kind of format, whether it be animation, live-action TV series, anime. Is that it doesn't give enough information, it doesn't develop all the characters, and it doesn't introduce you to the universe. Smallville's pilot does that very well. It introduces all the major characters, it introduces a slight bit about the mythos, it also gives you enough information about how things would work, and also how Clark is, and of course the kryptonite gets that quite across fairly fucking quickly. There was a good selection of music. There is mostly licensed music in Smallville, so it was a good selection of music in there. There isn't an intro theme yet. I will comment on that in episode 2. I think that's when the intro comes in. There isn't an intro for this, so I can't talk about that at the moment, but overall the music was good. There were some minor issues I had with the overall thing. It did feel a bit cluttered with the characters. Now, they did manage to introduce everyone, but a lot of them didn't really get as much screen time as they probably should have, in my opinion. And I would have probably liked to have maybe if Chloe and Pete had a bit more screen time. They're only really there for about 10-15 minutes of the episode, and then we don't see them until the very end. Which even then they don't say anything. So I would like to have maybe they got a bit more development in the pilot, but there's understandable time restraints and maybe a few things were cut. But it was a bit cluttered in some instances when they were trying to introduce so much stuff into there. So especially with characters, it was a bit cluttered in some instances. I'm trying to think, was there anything else bad about it? They could have done a wee bit more, in my opinion. They did actually. I would have liked to have they maybe established a bit more of the stuff in the pilot. They did establish enough, but I would have liked if they maybe set a few more things in motion. But overall, I can happily say that Smallville's pilot is really, really good. It's a really enjoyable one. It doesn't fall into a lot of traps, which a lot of pilots do, but it does fall into one of them, which is they had a bit of a big cast. So they had to introduce a lot of people. So I can't really say they did a bad job. They done a really good job. I have seen better pilots, in my opinion. But this pilot was very well done with the cast that they have. The actors were done their job correctly. Of course, it's very early days. Of course, they are still growing. They were still growing into their role with the pilot. But I will say this is that they all done an excellent job to get their characters get the characters that they're portraying across. And also getting some hints towards relationships and maybe crushes, and also how their character may develop. It is hinted at in some instances of how certain characters will develop. But overall, I think all I've got to say is it's a good pilot. It was a bit cluttered in some instances. I wish they'd done a little bit more with it, but overall, a really good pilot. Not the best pilot in the world, but a really good pilot. It's on par with some of the best out there. But they could have done a bit better, in my opinion. But overall, I think the pilot was really well done. They could have added a few more things, and maybe taken away one or two other things. Like I don't really want to say what scenes, because one or two are spoiler scenes. But I think overall it was really well done. So definitely thumbs up for the pilot. Really good, a really good pilot. And I think that's all I've got to say in this. So thank you for watching. Hope you enjoyed. Let me know what you thought of the Smallville pilot when you first saw it, or go back and watch it again and let me know what you thought of it down in the comment section down below. I will continue this, and hopefully next time will be episode 2, where I can finally talk about the intro. So thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed this, and as always, I'm Scottish Warrior 92, and I hope you enjoyed the first ever episode of Series Review. Ciao for now.